A decentralized physical infrastructure network is... Oh, hey there. I'm just looking at our dictionary, trying to figure out what is the definition of a true DePIN. Are we getting smarter? Well, you're about to today. Welcome back to the fourth ever edition of the DePIN Hub newsletter weekly recap, where we are recapping the week of October 7th through the 11th. 7-Eleven, like everyone's favorite convenience store. And this is your convenient shop for news about crypto's hottest space. And I am your cashier.
Thank y'all. Come again.
/ guy who reads notes really well with a lot of animation. Michael, head of growth at Hotspotty. Today, we're going to be talking about a big topic, which is defining what DePIN really is. It means that there's a lot of noise, and we're trying to sift through that noise and figure out what is meaningful, what is real, what is worthy of investing into building, what is driving technological progress, and why should government bodies and regulators be paying attention, and to whom? So we're going to make sense of this rapidly growing space today. Before we do that, wanted to let you all know that something big is happening with our friends 𝒓𝒄𝒂𝒕. You can work with them together to free the internet, starting in Latin America and now spreading throughout the world. They've just dropped a pre-sale on 2 new Wi-Fi miners, an indoor and an outdoor model, aptly titled Apocalypse and Prometheus. So grab yours today with a little discount code DePINHub10.
Get the lowest price ever at Radio Shack on the most powerful transportable cellular phone system. There's nothing else to buy, and it's ready to go wherever you go. Call when you wanna call.
So if you check our newsletter, you can see it there as well, but we'll put it in the show description, DePINHub10. Go to their shop, get 10% off. 𝒓𝒄𝒂𝒕, check them out. Their CEO, 𝒓𝒆𝒂𝒂𝒍𝒍𝒚, also gave a really cool talk at DePIN Revolution. Definitely worth tuning into, especially if you want to get involved in that project. So, moving right along to our friends at, wait, again? Yes, again. A second quest with 𝒓𝒄, the next 𝒓𝒄 quest. So, 𝒓𝒄. Last week, we did a little tweet giveaway in celebration of their recent trip to US Congress. If you missed it, guess what? You missed it. But we have a new one to allow you to still gain some future 𝒓𝒄 tokens. What do you have to do? You need to go to their decentralized version of Google Drive called DShare, upload a file, make sure that it's PG, people, because this is going to get shared publicly, and then we have a tweet which you are going to comment on, and then paste the link to your file. With that, 𝒓𝒄 will pick a few winners, reach out to them on X, and let you know what you need to do to claim those future 𝒓𝒄 tokens. So give DShare a little test drive, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, 𝒓𝒄. Now, moving right along to the feature of this issue. So we've just kicked off a new series at DePIN Hub called Decoding DePIN to help you make sense of this wild and wacky world known as decentralized physical infrastructure networks. So after last week, where we broke down the mammoth report by Compound VC, you might have been left feeling a bit confused. Which one of these projects are actually DePIN, and which ones just sound like they're doing something kind of cool with tokens? Well, we're going to help you make sense of that today by helping you define what really is a DePIN after all. But before we do that, speaking of DePIN and making sense of this ecosystem, what better place to start than with the DePIN Association, who is the sponsor of this episode of the newsletter recap and of the newsletter itself. The DePIN Association is driving the future of decentralized physical infrastructure networks through their 4 tenets of standardization, research, education and advocacy, and events. If you are a DePIN project or an aspiring one and would like to join the association, the link will be in the description of this video. You can also go to deepinassociation.com. Hotspotty and the DePIN Hub are also founding members of the association because we believe in making sense and standardizing DePIN. Now about that, the world of DePIN, where the lines between physical infrastructure and digital tokens cross into knots more confusing than your first modem setup.
Mom, hang up the phone, please. I'm trying to download a song. I just need 4 more hours on the dial-up.
Well, the slow days of dial-up may be gone. Now we're moving in a super fast digital world, and with that, speed sometimes breeds confusion. There's DePIN projects popping up like mushrooms after a day's rain. People are seeing the potential of this space to actually bring crypto into the real world, to make it mainstream, and that means that capital is also flowing. With success breeds imitation, ladies and gentlemen. Messari, if you know them as probably the Bloomberg of crypto, you could say, along with Future Money Group, which is a highly DePIN-focused venture capital firm, released a report in 2023 where they already claimed that there was 650 DePINs already in the market. Now, us at Hotspotty might argue that not all of those are DePINs, or at least noteworthy DePINs, but we'll get into that in our next week's episode about how to spot a healthy DePIN. Regardless, that's a lot. Now in 2024, that number has nearly doubled, and Messari is estimating that it could 20x in the near future. How to make sense of this? Are these all really DePINs? Or are some of these imposters? Well, I guess the first question would be, why does this even matter? Are we just being pedantic? I mean, I am a Virgo. We're very analytical. We like to define things. But listen, people, this isn't just about Michael's OCD. This is real. It matters for the following reasons. Investment clarity. As capital begins to flow, institutional investors, such as VCs, but also retail investors, most likely yourself, need to have confidence about what exactly they're putting their money into. And when you're looking at technological progress and value creation, it's important to know that these technologies are actually being applied to some type of tangible value creation, and that we're not just tracking projects that are basically blowing up over speculation and creating memes, right? Regulatory preparedness and advocacy. As governments begin to pay attention to this space, it's also important that we can communicate to them the size, the players, the technology, the importance, etc., so they also can know how best to regulate it. And then it's also about supporting the projects themselves. You know, what standards should you be using? What events should you be attending? Who should you be partnering with? Which VCs to reach out to because they're thesis driven on the space of DePIN? And last but not least, and very much connected to that last point, is community. How to build out the correct community. Unlike in other spaces in crypto, such as meme coins, where things are really about short-term gains and speculation and everyone's just playing a wild game of tokenized gambling, DePINs are about a long-term view. It's about real-world value creation and actual innovation. It's essentially building a business, just like in the old Web 2 sense, just using certain Web 3 mechanisms. So now that we're all a little bit more clear on why this topic is actually important, instead of just listening to me rant all day, which I do like to do,
four-flushing, low-life, snake-licking, dirt-eating inbred,
we pulled 3 experts in the field. So 2 DePIN project founders and a DePIN thesis-driven investor. So first and foremost, our friends at Anyone, formerly known as 𝒓𝒄𝒄, building that decentralized privacy layer on the internet, essentially a tokenized version of the Tor network. We talked to Neuradek, their COO. Neuradek's quote about how do you define a DePIN is, a true DePIN is a system that gains its competitive edge from the distribution and diversity of its contributors. So he emphasizes there's a unique strength also on the diversity of the types of contributors you have in the network. He also emphasized a utilization of idle resources with lower marginal costs, aka driving to efficiency. He also said that the best DePINs create a new class of product that cannot feasibly exist in a monolithic form. So he's basically saying that it's not just decentralizing infrastructure, ladies and gentlemen, but actually enabling completely new possibilities through their decentralized nature. Pretty deep. Now, moving along to our friends at Hivemapper, building the world's freshest maps through a decentralized network of dash cams. Our friend Ben, the self-subscribed champion of DePIN, the communications lead of Hivemapper, said that a true DePIN is unique in its focus on solving real-world infrastructure problems through decentralization. He went on to claim that it is a solution to the inherent imbalance in how nature and human systems work, essentially redistributing expensive or scarce resources more efficiently. So it's basically doing what a proper economy is meant to do in the first place. Basically, what's interesting about Ben's point of view is that he also sees DePIN as a tool for economic and social equality. So pretty idealistic, but we agree, and we like that here at DePIN Hub. Now, moving along to the venture capital side, Borderless Capital and their DePIN partner 𝒓𝒂𝒂𝒕. By the way, Borderless Capital is one of the oldest and biggest investors in the DePIN space, and they recently launched their $100 million DePIN fund, which is pretty exciting. 𝒓𝒂𝒂𝒕 said, for us, the most important thing is the incentives. DePIN is a network that leverages resources, typically geographically distributed resources, and all of this is incentivized by tokens, which represent ownership in the protocol. So 𝒓𝒂𝒂𝒕 is focusing on distributed ownership. He's implying that the DePINs not only democratize the operation of infrastructure, but also the ownership and governance of that infrastructure. So there you have it, folks. Now, if we return back to Compound VC, whose mammoth 100+ page report we summarized in our last episode, you might recall DePINs really show their value when one of three things, or maybe all of these three things, are present. Scaling infrastructure is costly or cumbersome. Hello, telcos. There's an opportunity to create greater efficiency in matching supply and demand, looking at you, decentralized energy grids, and accelerating a cheaper end state as previously underutilized assets are brought closer to their full capacity. So say hello, idle compute resources, and all you gamers out there. What are our takes at Hotspotty? Because every now and then I like to pretend like I'm smart. Well, we have three additional little add-ons. First of all, there should be a strong focus on real-world demand. So not just creating a solution without a problem, but ensuring that you are solving a real problem that people are willing to pay for and that there's a healthy enough demand to get there. Just like when you're looking at the TAM, SAM, and SOM of a normal business. Distributed OpEx. I would argue that this might be the most important. So OpEx stands for operational expenditure, and basically that means that would normally require an expensive and centralized approach, which you can now innovate and disrupt on by distributing it in a crowdsourced fashion to reduce the time and the expenses, etc. And last but not least, tokenomics. Obviously, these are token incentivized networks. They used to be called TPIN before DePIN, right? But you need to ensure that your tokenomics don't just incentivize network growth, but also the long-term usage of the network in a sustainable fashion. Everyone's essentially trying to drive towards that utopian state of Burn-Mint equilibrium, where basically demand and the tokenomics are matching. So, Future Money Group, in the same report, but in the 2024 version, also emphasized that there needs to be a large demand market, sufficiently large, so it can't just be some small demand, but also an ease in standardizing the supply side of your products. So if it's something that you can't easily standardize, then you're not going to have a very economical go-to-market. So now that we have a better understanding of what exactly is DePIN, it's time to look at its family tree, looking around to find some of those DePIN doppelgangers. We're going to look at some of the cousins of DePIN, such as DeFi, RWAs, and decentralized AI. So DeFi is a space you're probably pretty familiar with, decentralized finance. When you're thinking about that, you're thinking about lending, you're thinking about collateral, automated market makers, speculation, quick gains, huge risk.
I'm talking about this.
Now, of course, DeFi is very important for DePIN. Why? Because just like in traditional industry, you want the traditional financial markets to help create liquidity, right, for your business. DePIN's the same. It most likely integrates the best into a Web3 financial market, such as DeFi. However, DeFi is not the same as DePIN. But when they come together, you see some very interesting things. The closest cousin of that match is an RWA, which would be real-world assets. So when you think about RWAs and DePIN, this is where things can get a little bit confusing. But let's break it down using an apple. Now, if you think about apples, an RWA is essentially a tokenized apple. Why? Because it holds a value that's directly backed by an actual real-world asset. You can trade it and you can create more liquidity of that real-world asset because maybe it's hard to actually physically sell, move around, and trade. It's essentially like a security, and often RWAs are treated or considered as security tokens, meaning that they're put into a very different regulatory environment than DePIN, which would normally be considered a utility token. A DePIN, on the other hand, coming back to our Apple analogy, would be more like a decentralized, tokenized Apple network. It's not actually about the apples themselves. It's about building a new system for growing, distributing, or accessing these apples, right? So a big difference here is that in a DePIN scenario, you're looking at network effects. So, investors like to invest into things that have network effects. DePIN can help create those network effects, and RWA doesn't necessarily have them. It's more like a mechanism to bring more liquidity for a traditional asset. Feeling a bit more confident? Not so sure? Well, you can test out your own knowledge. We actually created a little game in our newsletter called Spot the DePIN. It's like Where's Waldo, but cooler. Moving along to one final important aspect of DePINs, which is basically their breakdown. There's really a big thick line being drawn in the sand between two sides. Side one is DRNs, side two is PRNs. So DRNs stand for Digital Resource Networks, while PRNs stand for Physical Resource Networks. So essentially you're talking about a purely digital play in the DePIN space. Think about Filecoin, IONET, LivePeer, Render, etc. Or physical plays that actually involve hardware that you might have to buy, set up, install, maintain. Think about Helium, GeoNet, Hivemapper, Wingbits, etc. For me personally, I think DRNs is where it can get a bit confusing as the line can begin to blur the further out you go into the digital space. When you start getting into things like L2s, rollups, proof of service protocols that basically use things like restaking for security. It almost sounds like you're back into the world of DeFi again. So where exactly do you draw that line? This is where it gets very important to go back to that original definition of DePIN and look at things like, do you have distributed OpEx? Are you reaching a more efficient end state, matching supply and demand, often utilizing idle resources to get there and drive those efficiencies? If all of these things are answered as yes, then a lot of these digital resource networks actually are, in fact, DePINs. Now, on the physical side, which I personally, and this is just me personally, find the most interesting because this is the first time that crypto has really been truly applied to the real world. When you actually take things like dash cams and sensors for the weather and, telecom towers and networks, solar panels, and you bring those things on chain and create completely new services around them that optimize the initial CapEx outlay or the ongoing OpEx, I think that's quite fascinating and it's easier to categorize as a DePIN. But again, that's just my opinion. Or is it? Because if you really go all the way back, this whole thing kind of started with Bitcoin, didn't it? Remember those ASIC miners and everyone talking about the electricity usage? So is that DePIN? Well, the difference is, while that might be proof of work, in the world of DePIN, it's really about proof of meaningful work. So when you're mining, what type of meaningful value are you creating from those miners? And to me, that's the definition of a DePIN. Bitcoin wouldn't quite qualify, but debatable topic.
They're eating the dogs.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Speaking of debatable topics, we want to open up this debate to you. So it's just not Michael talking to himself like a schizophrenic. You can join the debate on Hotspotty's Twitter. You can find some Twitter threads already in existence about this topic, or you can go to our newsletter and find the direct link to a Twitter thread right now. Or if not, you can just add your own ideas about what you believe is and isn't a DePIN or how you would define it in the comments to this video. Let's get the debate going, people. Now, if you're still feeling a bit confused or you're thinking, okay, I get it already, I get what's a DePIN, but how do I pick a good one? How do I spot a healthy one? That will be the topic of next week's newsletter and newsletter recap. Now, last but not least, wrapping up what took place last week on the DePIN Hub podcast with our co-founder and CTO, Daniel Andrade. This episode was brought to you straight from the poolside in Thailand, together with IoTex and the project 𝒓𝒂𝒕, which is monitoring, analyzing, and troubleshooting internet performance in a kick-ass decentralized fashion. And sponsored by our friends at Nebula, revolutionizing ESG data collection with real-time, hyper-local weather data powered by decentralized stations and AI-driven insights. Boom. Thank you guys for sponsoring the pod. Thank you guys for checking out the pod. Show our friend Daniel Andrade some love. And thank you for hanging around. I know that was a lot. But for this one, ladies and gentlemen, that's a wrap. We'll see you next week where we'll help you spot a healthy DePIN. Until then, DePIN revolutionaries, stay decentralized.